Good morning and welcome to the Master Your Dragon series. We're looking at advanced skills in emotional competence. This is module 3A, and we're going to look specifically at what happens on an individual level when our dragon feels under threat and some of the mechanisms we use to manage anxiety. Quick recap. So we've been talking about how our conscious rational self interacts with our subconscious irrational self. And we have this survival brain part of ourselves that actually quite often brings impulses and emotions that drives our behavior. And we're going to really focus specifically on an individual. If you feel under threat, what kind of behaviors might come to the fore? So let's just talk through the relationship between emotion and behavior. And we start off with an external event. So something happens. It can either be something like a dog runs towards you barking, or it might be something that you're thinking. So remembering a dog running towards you barking. And it causes either a threat to you. So you're feeling threatened either on a physical level, like if a dog's trying to attack you, or you might feel emotionally threatened if somebody is horrible or nasty to you, or you might feel your freedom of expression is suppressed if somebody is blocking you from doing something because of who you are. So that will make us feel unsafe, but also sometimes some of our drives can make us feel unsafe. So if we have a real need for food, need for safety, a need to belong to a particular tribe, a need to gain power, we've spoken about that in some of our previous modules, and also our drive to have an intimate partner. So all of these things are unconscious stimuli that's coming towards us, either through our thoughts or either through an external stimulus. So this always translates into a powerful biological impulse. So as soon as you are feeling under threat, no matter whether it's physical or emotional, your body creates a biological response to actually manage that threat. So adrenaline is a very good example. If something is threatening your safety, your body's going to make a lot of adrenaline to help you tackle that safety. And so, for example, if you've got a dog chasing you, the biological impulse that will be triggered is fear, and you will have a biological impulse to actually move away. So this biological impulse is now going to translate into a particular behavior. And this behaviors are very much reactive towards the emotion that you are feeling. It's very much focused on survival or managing this particular threat. And so, for example, you might shout at the dog, or you might freeze, or you might run away from the dog, depending on that scenario. So that's all very well when you're dealing with physical threat. It's a very clever little system that your sort of genetic body has created to try and help you deal with threat. But it's a little bit different when you are in a much more complex scenario where you have to deal with a much more complex situation. And so we have these very particular behaviors that we develop that helps to us to reduce when we have stress. And I'm going to talk a little bit about these behaviors, and I'm very much drawing on the work of Shahzad Chamin. Feel free to explore his book. He's got a great questionnaire as well, specifically on how you manage. And so let's take the example, for example, again, we're going to talk about that stimulus, emotion, and behavior, but the stimulus in this time is now you're having an argument with your partner about something quite important in your relationship. So this creates an emotion because you're feeling threatened. And again, this is a biological thing. And it can either be fear, so being scared about something that's happening, or you can get angry, the biological impulse to destroy, or you can feel grief if you're feeling abandoned or dismissed in some way. And we'll talk about the emotions in one of the other modules. And this feeling is extremely unpleasant. And so we have impulse, that fight, flight, freeze impulse to actually manage this experience that we are having. And again, these lead to very specific reactive behaviors. And we actually all have a complex set of behavior patterns that we've developed over time that's based on our fight, flight, freeze system that is going to help us manage this threat. And don't worry, we're going to look at them in detail. And Shahzad calls these saboteurs. So these saboteurs are behavior patterns. It's stuff we do. It's stuff we've learned to do in childhood over time as ways to make ourselves feel a little bit safer. And as we've mentioned with the dog, it's quite useful in physical threats, right? So great, running away or shouting at the dog or running away from the dog, excellent. But it's not going to work so well when you're having this discussion with your partner. So if you now decide to either go run away and hide under the bed, or you decide to shout at him, it's probably going to make the scenario worse. And that's why Shahzad likes to call these saboteurs. Whenever somebody is behaving badly or whenever somebody is behaving in a negative way, you can be sure that one of these saboteurs is in play. And this is what our dragon looks like in action when it's trying to manage. So very fun. We're going to look at 9 possible ways in how our behaviors we use to manage our anxiety. And you can look out for yourself, which are some of your favorite methods, feeling under threat, what you do. So some people fight, they might step into this space. And the classic thing, we all do this, is to criticize, right? Something's not going well, something is not as you would have liked it, or you're feeling under threat, and immediately you're negative about it, either to the person or to yourself or about the scenario. And there is an irrational thought underneath that you're treating people about, well, why did you make a mistake? Well, why aren't you perfect? Well, I should never be making a mistake. Well, things should never go wrong. We sort of have this underlying irrational ways of trying to justify these behaviors that are coming out. But very much any name calling, any insulting, any hate speech is very much out of this need to criticize. And again, this is a biological impulse to manage anxiety. The second classic method, and those of us that are professors or senior lecturers or work in the world of education or love doing this, and that is by using our analytical intelligence to overanalyze a particular thought. So within this anxiety, there's an idea, well, why doesn't this person just know that? Or maybe if I just explain it to them, they'll get it. So a lot of the preaching and mansplaining that we talk about is people using this as a way to manage their anxiety. As a doctor with patients, we often do that as if we're anxious or nervous about the way that they're behaving, is that we will tell them a whole lot of stuff that they actually already know, and not actually listening to what it is that the patient needs to hear. The third fight mechanism that we use to try and reduce our anxiety is manipulating the scenario, or manipulating the other person. People who are very organized and are very good at organizing their own lives quite often use this as a mechanism to organize other people's lives. And the irrational thought is, of course, well, I can do this better than you, or you should do it my way, or I'll just come in and sort this all out. It's the mother instinct. This is a classic the underlying mechanism for gaslighting. So when you're ever in a scenario when somebody's trying to gaslight you and trying to make you feel that you're actually imagining it or not understanding what's going on, they're actually using this as a mechanism to be reducing their anxiety, again, very subconsciously. And a lot of bullying has to do with trying to manipulate other people. And of course, these kinds of mechanisms, if they overshoot, can actually become physically violent. We also have mechanisms to reduce anxiety, which is more in our freeze, sort of within it's a little bit of a loose definitions under our freeze mechanisms of dealing with anxiety. And I think a common one, especially people who are very kind, don't like conflict, might use pleasing or fawning to try and placate whatever the scenario is. And what's happening specifically with pleasing, it's not just about being responsibly trying to calm somebody else down, is you're actually sacrificing your own thoughts and your own ideas. And what you're hoping is that if I'm really nice, maybe they will be nice back. And I must just, not say anything, and hopefully it will all be fine. And your person who will be described as a pleaser usually falls within this category. Some people, they deal with their anxiety, get really fixated on details or obsessing to try and get things perfect, hoping that somehow can manage their anxiety. So it's a mechanism of trying to feel like you're gaining control over a situation where you don't feel like you're in control. So the underlying irrational thought will be, this will be perfect, or I'm not okay. So I must get it perfect. And the more perfect it is, the more okay I can be. I mean, of course, this is what underlies our obsessions and compulsions. So people with OCD will have this particular way of dealing with anxiety. But some people are very perfectionistic, and that perfectionism is usually worse when they're anxious. So quite often people think people are anxious because they're perfectionists, but quite often it's the opposite way around. It's because they're anxious that they become more and more fixated on details. This is also very common, and that is the worrying or bargaining tendency. And this is in the middle of the night when you can think of a million different things that's possibly going to go wrong or had go wrong. And there's sort of an irrational thought, if I prepare for the worst, or if I think this through properly, if I can think of everything that's going to go wrong, then somehow it's going to make things better. A way that often comes out in behavior and relationship is somebody will come and tell you about their concerns that they have for you. And again, this is a way of trying to manage their own anxiety, again, not listening to where the other person is at, but bringing all their own worries that is being produced by all this adrenaline and anxiety. You can see in the top corner there's that little classic cycle of how our anxiety drives irrational thoughts. And this is a classic one where we'll have a lot of irrational thinking that will make us more anxious, that will create more irrational thoughts. And so you end up being awake the whole night. The third set of mechanisms are the flee mechanisms. And these are ways that we try and avoid and get away from the threat. So this can literally be just avoiding whatever is happening. So the irrational thought be, well, I'll do it some other time. I'll deal with it tomorrow. I can't deal with this now. I can't manage this now. And of course, if you keep on repeatedly doing this, you're not actually solving the issue. So quite often people might look like they're apathetic, they might look unengaged. Sometimes we call people lazy, we call them too quiet, not engaging. And actually what's happening is they've withdrawn from the situation because they don't feel safe and they're feeling anxious to be in that scenario. We also all have moments where we feel very sorry for ourselves. If you're on call and it's 3 o'clock in the morning and your phone goes off again, that feelings of self-pitying. And again, we have these lovely irrational thoughts of, I'm not supposed to be this hard. Why am I worse off than everyone else? Why is things always going wrong with me? And our little moments of victim mentality and also our moments of entitlement lies a little bit within this feeling sorry for ourselves. Somebody else is supposed to come and sort it all out. And then a third methodology, and this is quite an important one, and we'll have a whole session where we'll just look at addictions, is when we distract ourselves instead of dealing with what's making us anxious. And the irrational thought there is, I just need a break from all of this. I cannot cope without actually having this particular thing to help me. Obviously, all of our addictions lie within this particular skill. So if this is your default way of dealing with anxiety, and you have an addiction as a result, it's quite hard to actually get out of the addiction unless you still learn how to deal with your anxiety without that substance. In the modern world of today, social media has become the number one distractor for when we are feeling anxious. And again, it's sometimes not a good idea to actually take yourself out of a scenario that's making you anxious. But if you're playing Candy Crush instead of studying for an exam, that's definitely going to sabotage some of your future plans. So the reflection exercise, and again, I will put in the YouTube comment section just a link to a form you can download that will have all these reflections on it. But it's quite interesting for yourself to start becoming aware of what is your mechanisms that you use when you deal with anxiety. And it can be in various scenarios. So it can be in a scenario with a child of yourself or a friend or a senior colleague or a patient or in whatever your work scenario is, because we use different mechanisms also depending on what's appropriate in the setting that we have. And so just a reminder, these are unconscious or subconscious behaviors that come to the fore. Quite often we haven't even noticed they're doing them by the time they step forward. And they pretty much usually makes whatever scenario you're in, especially in terms of relationship and communication, they are guaranteed to make things worse. So thank you very much. I think this module is particularly powerful in terms of us becoming aware of our own behaviors and where they are coming from, but also becoming more gracious of other people's behaviors who might be displaying some of these particular characteristics, and being able to realize they are anxious, they are not feeling safe, and these are automated behaviors rather than particular personality traits. Thank you very much. We'll continue in the next module.